Hello students, welcome to BBA 432, International Business Management. Today I will be covering Chapter 18, Global Operations and Supply Chain Management. Here are some of the objectives of the chapter, particularly focusing on the definition of global supply chain management, and also to describe the different facets of global operations strategies. We will discuss how global sourcing is an important aspect of global supply chain and operations management. We will also explain how information technology is used in global operations and supply chain management, concluding our discussion with a summary of how quality management is important in global operations. Here is figure 18.1 summarizing one of the objectives about an integrated global supply chain and operations strategy. This figure illustrates what is meant by global supply chain management. So it explains how supply, logistics, and operations come together to form a global supply chain strategy. So we continue to define what is meant by global supply chain management, as also summarized in Objective 8.1 and Figure 8.1. Basically, here the supply chain management refers to activities in the value chain that occur outside of the company. So here we're talking about the variables that are external to the company, the variables that are in the external environment of the company. So value chain activities always occur outside the company. Whereas operations management, which is also known as logistics management, refers to internal activities, right? In other words, supply chain management always occurs external to the company, whereas operations management, also known as logistics management, occurs outside of the company. So if we look at the different facets of global operations, we will be talking about compatibility, configuration, coordination, and control. So one piece in the supply chain strategy for both manufacturing and services is the operations of the company. So operations is all about the conversion of inputs into outputs. The success of a global operations strategy depends on four key factors: compatibility, configuration, coordination, and control. So let's explain each of them and give examples for each facets of global operations strategies. Compatibility in a supply chain management context is the degree of consistency between the foreign investment decision and the company's competitive strategy. Some companies, for instance, Walmart, adopt a low-cost strategy. Walmart is a cost leader within its own industry. Others, like Apple, for instance, have adopted a differentiation strategy where they design products that are relatively unique, expensive, and differentiated. Manufacturing configuration. In the global supply chain, suppliers transform raw materials into parts which make up the inputs that go into the conversion of parts into final products in the operations management phase. Okay? So focusing on the second facet, which is configuration, right? Configuration is all about, transforming raw materials into parts which make up the inputs that go into the conversion of parts into final products. Whereas coordination is all about the integration of activities into a unified system. We're integrating all the activities into a unified system of operations management. So these activities include everything along the global supply chain, from, let's say, purchasing the inputs to warehousing and to shipment, right? So, however, it's hard to coordinate supplier relations and logistics activities if those issues are not coordinated or if they are not considered when the manufacturing configuration is set up. Control factor, it is all about the company determining the manufacturing configuration that it will use. It must also adopt a control system to ensure that the company's strategies are uniformly and consistently carried out. Control can be the measuring of performance, so a firm can respond appropriately to changing conditions in its environment. So going back to learning objective 3, which is all about showing how global sourcing is an important aspect of global supply chain and operations management. Global sourcing is the first step in the process of materials management, which includes obtaining a supply of inputs used in the production process, inventory management, and transportation between suppliers, manufacturers, and customers. Let's say when a company wants to source raw materials, parts, or components as a function of its global strategy, it confronts some key decisions. It may, for example, decide to source the components at home using domestic labor, domestic inputs, and then assemble them abroad, and then export the final product to the home market, to foreign markets, or both. This figure of 18.2 shows that process, like how the company sources raw materials, parts, and components in the home country, right? They manufacture and assemble the components and final products abroad, and they ship those goods back to the home country to sell either in the domestic market or outside of the home country. We continue with learning objective of 3, focusing on how global sourcing is an important aspect of global supply chain management. Think about outsourcing. Outsourcing is a very important component of global sourcing. So what do we mean by outsourcing? Outsourcing basically refers to a situation in which one company externalizes a process or function to another company. Okay, so this company can be the company that the materials are outsourced from, can be within the domestic market or it can be outside of the domestic market. But why do companies pursue sourcing strategies? They pursue this strategy for a number of reasons. The first reason is the cost management, right? Companies want to reduce costs through cheaper labor, lax or much lighter work environment and rules and regulations, and lower land and facilities costs. They do outsourcing to improve quality, to increase exposure to worldwide technology, to improve the delivery of supplies process, or to strengthen the reliability of supply by supplementing domestic suppliers with foreign ones, to gain access to materials that are only available abroad, possibly because of technical specifications or product capabilities. Another reason might be to establish a presence in the foreign market or to satisfy offset requirements, to react to competitors or to compete with competitors' offshore sourcing practices. So when companies source outputs in different or from different parts of the world, they use a number of strategies. So we call these strategies as a type of strategies that promote sourcing configurations. One of them is vertical integration. Okay? Vertical integration, for instance, happens when a company owns the entire supplier network, or at least a significant part of it is, as is the case with Apple before it began to outsource to suppliers and use contract manufacturers, right? Apple used to produce everything by itself. It didn't source materials. It used its own inputs, right? They own the entire supplier network and therefore had full control over each step of the global supply chain management. But again, vertical integration can be a costly exercise for a company. And Apple, before it began to outsource to suppliers and use contract manufacturers, it used to be a vertically integrated company. Sometimes companies utilize industrial clusters, right? So utilizing industrial cluster is an alternative way to reduce transportation and transaction costs. Under clustering, buyers and suppliers locate close to each other to facilitate doing business. For instance, most of the time we consider Silicon Valley as a very important Silicon Valley or Hollywood, right? Hollywood or Silicon Valley can be considered as an important industrial clusters because everybody, the buyers, the suppliers, the technology experts, the companies, they are all located in close proximity to each other, and therefore they facilitate doing business with each other. So there is another decision, make or buy decision. So when it comes to production activities, multinational companies' managers struggle with a make or buy decision. So make or buy decision is all about which product should be performed internally and which should be subcontracted to independent companies. So companies are always facing this dilemma or decision, make or buy. which products should be performed internally and which could be or should be subcontracted to independent companies. In the case of subcontracting, a company must also decide whether the activities should be carried out in the home market or abroad. This often involves developing a strategy that might be a combination of outsourcing, offshoring, and/or supply chain. The other issue that we will be talking about is the supplier relationships. Supplier relationships are extremely important, but sometimes it can be complicated. There might be conflicts of interest among the producer and the supplier, especially for multinational organizations trying to manage them around the world. There is also the conflict minerals. Conflict minerals is a real challenge for US-based multinational corporations. It is in compliance, those companies are in compliance with a provision in the Dodd-Frank Act that requires companies to disclose the use of certain minerals mined in war-torn or conflict areas, primarily in Africa. So information technology is an important player, is an important aspect of global operations. It is commonly used in global operations and supply chain management. EDI, electronic data interchange, it is the key to making a global information system work, which is getting the relevant information in a timely manner. Apple, for example, think about Apple, which has established a B2B, business to business. Like B2B, it refers to business gateway that all of its suppliers are required to use, which basically allows suppliers to share electronic data with Apple. Many companies use electronic data interchange, ADI, to link suppliers, manufacturers, customers, and intermediaries, especially in the food manufacturing and car making industries, in which suppliers replenish in high volumes. The next wave of technology affecting the global supply chain was the implementation of IT packages known as Enterprise Resource Planning. Enterprise Resource, ERP. Companies such as Oracle, for instance, Beyond, PeopleSoft, and German software giant, the German software giant, which is also known as SAP, introduced software to integrate everything in the back office. The back office is always the part of the business dealing with internal matters, as opposed to the front office, which deals with the customer. ERP is essential for bringing together the information inside the firm with information from different geographic areas. But it has certain problems, particularly the inability to tie in to the customer and take advantage of e-commerce, which has been a problem. Radio frequency ID, which is a newer wave of companies, has recently swept the technology scene in the form of radio frequency system, RFID, a system that labels a product with an electronic tag that stores and transmits information on the product's origin, destination, and quantity. When electronic readers scan the text by means of radio waves, the data can be rewritten or captured and sent to a computer network database. which collects, organizes, stores, and moves the data, often in conjunction with ERP system. So again, we continue the discussion with the information technology used in the global operations and supply chain management. Please review this slide carefully. The companies with web-based systems will always establish something known as extranet for suppliers. Extranet. So which provides a linkage to the company's information system via the internet, so that the suppliers can organize production and the delivery of parts and so forth and so on. And there is something also known as intranet, right? Extranet versus intranet. Intranet is all about helping the company automate and speed up internal processes in a company, which is also known as intranet. Okay? Intranet, in other words, refers to the use of the internet in global supply chain management, which helps automate and speed up the internal processes in a company's management through the internet. Okay? A recent development in technology is Private Technology Exchange, PTX, Private Technology Exchange, which function as an online collaboration model that brings manufacturers, distributors, value-added resellers, and customers together through the internet to execute trading transactions and share information about demand, production, availability, and much more. The digital divide is all about the rise of the digital networks of operations, right? The challenge in the global supply chain management is that although some networks can be managed through the internet, particularly, the ones they use the network systems that are specialized in the internet, right? Some networks can be managed through the internet. Others, particularly in emerging markets, cannot be managed through the internet because of the lack of technology or low internet speeds or connection. So therefore, the use of the internet varies always by location, industry, and the country, especially the country's level of economic development. So basically, quality management is absolutely important in the global supply chain. Quality is all about meeting or exceeding the customer's expectations. More specifically, it is conformance to specifications, value, fitness for use, support, and psychological impressions. Quality also refers to zero defects, an idea perfected by Japanese manufacturers who refuse to tolerate flaws of any kind. Before this strong emphasis on getting rid of defects, many companies operated according to the principles of acceptable quality level, which held that a few faulty products would be dealt with through repair facilities and service warranties. In this context, if we look at the total quality management, you will realize that it describes the process that stresses three principles: customer satisfaction, continuous improvement, and employee involvement. TQM basically stresses three important stakeholders or principles. Number one, customer satisfaction. Number two, continuous improvement. Number three, employee involvement. The goal here is to eliminate all the defects. TQM often focuses on benchmarking world-class standards: product and service design, process design, and purchasing. Foreign sourcing can be quite risky for the companies that use lean manufacturing and GIT, because interruptions in the supply chain can cause major instabilities. Multinational companies are becoming expert at meeting the requirements of JIT, ships that take 2 weeks to cross the Pacific, docking within an hour of scheduled arrival, factories that are able to more easily fill small orders, and so on. However, because of distances alone, the supply chain is open to more problems and delays. The Kanban system is a system pioneered by Toyota to facilitate GIT strategies, also known as the Kanban system, right? It is named after the Japanese word for card or visible record. Kanban cards are used to control the flow of production through a factory. And then we have other quality standards such as Six Sigma, ISO standards, industry-specific standards, company-specific standards, right? Six Sigma, think about it like a statistical approach, a very statistical, effective approach to quality management developed by Motorola. It was developed by Motorola, the company Motorola, and popularized by General Electric. It's a highly focused system of quality control that scrutinizes a company's entire production system. It eliminates all the defects, slash product cycle times, and cut costs across the board. The system uses data and rigorous statistical analysis to identify defects in a process or product, reduce variability, and achieve as close to zero defects as possible. So ISO is more like a general level standard introduced by the International Organization for Standardization in Geneva. It was formed in 1947 to facilitate the international coordination and unification of industrial standards. From the beginning, it has partnered with something called IEC, International Electrotechnical Commission, which is the originator of global technical standards. It also collaborates with the International Telecommunications Union and the World Trade Organization. ISO is an NGO. It's an NGO that represents a network of standard setters in 161 countries and has established over 21,000 international quality standards. And then there are the industry-specific standards. So in addition to the general standards that we discussed above, there are industry-specific standards for quality, especially for suppliers. And then there are further company-specific standards, which means that individual companies also set their own standards for suppliers to meet if they are going to continue to supply them. In this chapter, we talk about global supply management. We talk about the importance of domestic and foreign outsourcing for the global operations of the company. And we close the chapter with a discussion of several standards that are being used to measure the performance of the companies, including ISO standards, total quality management, Kanban system, and so forth and so on. Thanks for listening to my lecture, and this was the last chapter of the semester, and I hope you guys enjoyed the lectures, and I wish you a happy break after your final examinations. Have a good day. Bye-bye.